Mark Thiessen, he's a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Karen Tumulty, opinion writer for The Washington Post. And Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and president. Mark, you know the importance of presidents visiting troops in the field in this context, especially after all that has happened after the Syria announcement. What about this day?
It's a great day, and look, give all credit to the president for making the trip, all credit to him for taking the First Lady, which is a historic first, and I'm sure our troops really appreciated having her along as well and getting a chance to meet her. And it's always, this is the president's first trip to a combat zone since he took office, and it's really important to do that because you get a chance to, President Bush always said, I need the advice, and I kind of deferred to my commanders on the ground. Well, now he had a chance to sit down today with the commanders on the ground, and what I'm sure, and I hope he listened to them, because what I'm sure those commanders on the ground told him is that ISIS is not defeated. It's true the president is right when he says we've knocked the hell out of them, but they are not defeated. And he had to knock the hell out of them because of the precipitous withdrawal that his predecessor Barack Obama made. They had about 700 adherents when Barack Obama pulled out, and they turned into tens of thousands and took over a territory the size of Ohio in Syria and Iraq. Right now, according to our military, they have about 30,000 fighters. They have lost their physical caliphate, and President Trump deserves great credit for removing their physical caliphate. But what they've done is they've reverted into a classic insurgency. And according to our military, ISIS is as powerful today as they were before the surge in 2007. So they are not defeated yet, and we have a lot of work to do before they are.
Karen?
Yeah, I think it was a great thing that he went, and I'm sure the troops very much appreciated it. And certainly after Christmas Eve, with the more than a dozen tweets, it was interesting. He was relatively disciplined for Donald Trump. I think the only thing that really marred it was when he kind of went into campaign rally mode at one point, where he brought in his fights with the Democrats and those sorts of things. Those are really not sort of the kind of rhetoric that we are used to seeing out of a president in this kind of setting, this sort of partisan sparring, taking it past our shores.
Yeah, he also said that he's not pulling U.S. troops out of Iraq, which I'm sure is a welcome news for the Iraqi prime minister, who's still dealing with issues in his country. About that Iraq commitment, take a listen to two former officials.
I think the president's trying to communicate that he is on top of the national security decisions that he's been faulted for recently, certainly for the Syria decision, and it's good to see that he's also on top of Iraq.
I think the fact that the president has demonstrated a commitment to Iraq is really important because we still have a lot of work to do there, both on the domestic political scene as well as ridding Iraq of those terrorists which are seeking to do them and us harm.
You know, and Tom, the security was extremely tight. They had some kind of thought that there was a breach heading over, that they were being tracked, Air Force One, as it landed in Al-Assad Air Base, and I think that might have tightened things even further. They did not meet one-on-one with the Iraqi prime minister on the ground. There was a phone call, but just being there and saying that the U.S. troops were staying is probably a relief to the Iraqis.
I'm sure it is, and also, I mean, I think it shows Trump. Look, to Mark's point, I mean, there's been some discussion about whether this is a wise move or not. It's certainly the pullout of troops from Syria. It certainly was something that Trump talked about a lot, campaigned on, wanted to do, and he's finally doing it. But I think there's also reassurance that, you know, Trump's not going to be shy if ISIS rears its head, using the troops in Iraq as a base to go back and you know, knock the heck out of him, as Trump would say. So I think he absolutely is going to be committed to the fight against ISIS.
All right, let's turn now to the shutdown and where we are in this standoff. Here is the president on Tuesday, and also his top economic advisors.
I can't tell you when the government's going to be open. I can tell you it's not going to be open until we have a wall, a fence, whatever they'd like to call it. I think they understand what's happening. They want border security. The people of this country want border security. You know, it's not a question of me. I'd rather not be doing shutdowns.
They might miss a pay period because the government's shut down, but in the end, even if they aren't working, then Congress has decided to pay people for the whole time. And so in the end, it's really just a sort of short-term problem, not a long-term problem for government workers.
Mark, I mean, there seems to be backbone here on the president's part, and the word from Capitol Hill is that he is not going to back down unless there's significant movement on the wall or border security or a fence or whatever you want to call it.
I agree. Look, I think actually time is on the president's side in this shutdown fight, and here's why. Nancy Pelosi today made some snarky comment about how his concrete wall has become a beaded wall. That's a sign that the Democrats are not negotiating and they're not taking it seriously. The president, on the other hand, has put, Mick Mulvaney was on Fox News Sunday, and he said that they've made an counteroffer to the Democrats for a lower price tag. Fox News has been reporting that it's $2.1 billion. So the president is trying to compromise and come to an agreement, and the Democrats are making snarky jokes and thinking they have him on the run and not engaging. For the short term, he owns the shutdown because he claimed the mantle of the shutdown. He said, I want to shut down the government over border security. But over time, if he seems to be the one, Americans want compromise on this. If he's the one who's compromising and the Democrats are demanding absolute surrender, then it's going to backfire on them, because that's not what the American people want. And over time, as he keeps making, if he can be responsible and keep making concrete offers that are concessions to the Democrats, then over time they will start to own the mantle of the shutdown. So I think he's right to stick to his guns and be reasonable and make reasonable offers.
Yeah, and Karen, we put up the pie chart often about this particular shutdown and what has been funded and what is still really in doubt here, whether it gets a deal, and that is 25%. It affects the not yet enacted bills in the spending bills. That's still a lot of people potentially who are affected, as it could last into the new year.
And this idea that this is just a short-term impact and, that they will all get their back pay, the fact is, for these government workers, their mortgage payments still come due. Their credit card payments still come due. So a lot of these people are living paycheck to paycheck. And also, there are a lot of federal workers, people who work for the government, who are contractors, who clean the buildings, who really are paid on an hourly basis. And those people will not be getting back pay. So for the people who are affected, and yes, it is, a small piece of that pie chart, but to say that these are temporary effects and that it's like, no big deal as long as you get your back pay is simply not true for people who do live paycheck to paycheck.
Right. And to that point, what if the shutdown continues into the new year? This is an official talking about that. Kevin Haslett.
Lasts longer than December, then all that back pay that people would get for the weeks in December would come in January, and so that would have a slight negative effect on GDP in the fourth quarter and a positive effect on GDP in the first quarter.
Tom, I guess I just don't see, it's kind of rolling off of them. And if that's the case, then eventually this negotiation is going to go the other way.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, right now, this is sort of like the first quarter of this thing, and it's not really, people are on holiday. They're going to be on holiday through the first of the year, but after the first of the year, pressure is going to get ratcheted up. Democrats are going to come back. Nancy Pelosi is going to put a bill in the House on January 3rd to reopen the government, and then they're going to put the pressure on Trump. Why won't you sign this? Why won't you do this? Now, there won't be any border funding in that, and that's when the fight's really going to heat up, and we're going to see who's got the leverage and where the pressure points are, and whether Mark's scenario plays out, whether Trump can flip this on them and say, listen, I'm negotiating in good faith. You guys are not negotiating at all, so now it's your shutdown. But it is going to get serious in about a week.